Oh, good morning. Welcome in to the Out of Bounds Show. It is brought to you by the Men's Clinic in Madison and Brandon. Testosterone Replacement Therapy, Dr. Mike Manning. Dr. Cliff Adams. State-of-the-art clinic designed to help men with the aging process. Powered by the Men's Clinic in Madison and the Men's Clinic in Brandon. Visit their website right now, themanthing.com. We're 105.9 The Zone ESPN. We've been talking Ole Miss dominating Georgia. We thought we would bring on Ole Miss insider Brad Logan, who was there for the action, and he joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Was that the best atmosphere that you've ever been in Vaught-Hemingway?
In Vaught-Hemingway, yes. Thanks for having me on. I just received a message from an Ole Miss fan, and it showed their watch, and it was 90 decibels inside Vaught-Hemingway. And, I'm not telling anything specifically folks that are watching and listening to your program. Vaught-Hemingway is not historically a place to where visiting teams have come in and been, subjected to that type of an environment. It's not been conducive to having issues with hearing and that sort of thing. Now, we could date back to the 14 Arkansas game, maybe 03 LSU, maybe some Alabama games in the past, but nothing like we saw on Saturday.
Did you feel it from the jump? I mean, let's talk about that. Ole Miss throws a pick. Dart throws a pick. He had hurt his ankle. Georgia comes down, scores. How about that answer from Austin Simmons and the offense right out of the gate that settled everything down? Because if you don't answer there, the ball game may go another way, Brad.
I made it a point before the game to go and revisit some people that follow the program, members of the Ole Miss Network, radio network, that sort of thing, and people that were on site in Fayetteville, because I think they have a much better grasp of going into the game, the feeling of the game leading up during the week and that sort of thing. So I made those conversations a point of emphasis at the beginning of the game, and every one of those conversations were, I think, from what we saw against Arkansas, the opponent aside, I think what we saw from Ole Miss offensively, and mainly, Bo, what we saw defensively, I think Ole Miss is in a good chance to win the game. That came from every person I spoke to. Obviously, things changed a little bit when Jackson was injured. He threw the interception. But I would argue, and this is not being hyperbolic, I'm being dead serious, Bo, when I say the biggest drive, if Ole Miss finishes this out and hosts Notre Dame and maybe has a chance to play for big, things at the end of the year, I think we'll look back on the drive that Austin Simmons has and say that was one of the more important drives in the history of Ole Miss football, because the game was going to go another direction very quickly. Jackson couldn't go. Obviously, he went back to the 10. He, as what Lane says, received medical help. And obviously would come back into the game and would light things up. I want to read some stats where Jackson Dart is right now in the country. But I think, it was a huge drive, and it was an incredible atmosphere. And to answer your question, no, I was not surprised at how the outcome happened. I was a little surprised it happened the way it did, specifically in the beginning. I want to read a couple of things to you. In the country right now, Jackson Dart is number 1 in passing efficiency, number 2 in passing yards, number 4 in passing yards per game, and number 3 in passing yards per completion. Those are very, very good numbers considering where he started the year, kind of went through some ups and downs. I know you and I have spoke both on and off air about how he's been a bit of a roller coaster and been, in some ways, on the bottom end of that roller coaster throughout the year. But I thought it was big of him to have a statement game, a career game, a legacy game against a team like Georgia on Saturday.
Is that the best Ole Miss defense that you've ever watched?
Well, I said the 93 defense was better, but I'm going to go back on that, and I'm going to say yes. And the reason is just because of the way that it was kind of put together. And we talked to Lane Kiffin at the conclusion of the game last year when Ole Miss lost to Georgia. And the number one question we had is everyone keeps talking about this a college football playoff team? And he very quickly stopped us and said, no, it is not. We were outcoached. We were outplayed. We don't have the personnel. And frankly, whenever he made mention that he was on the field before the game, he knew that Ole Miss was in trouble. And I think anyone that was either there on the field, in the stands, or watching on television knew that Georgia had the dominant roster. And they won the game handily. I think it was 52-17. So Lane knew that he needed to get with Walker Jones or have personnel discussions with his staff. And then obviously Walker Jones with the Grove Collective has made mention that Lane's comments at the end of the game put the Grove Collective in overdrive. And boy, did they stand up. And that defense is one that has been, really fun to watch this year if you're an Ole Miss fan, because you look at a couple of things currently in the country, in the NCAA. They're number one in sacks with 46, number one in tackles for loss at 103, number three at fumbles recovered with 10. Here's the big one, number two in rushing defense behind Indiana at only 79.9 yards a game, and then number six in scoring defense. So this is a defense led by, I think, the best defensive coordinator in the country, and that's Pete Golding. I think there's an argument right now as we stand at this point in the season that Ole Miss has the best defense in the country. There probably is an argument for Indiana, but right now I think I'd give the nod to Ole Miss because of the competition piece that you have to play into that, playing in the Southeastern Conference.
Oh, no doubt. You played a much more difficult schedule. Brad Logan, Ole Miss insider, joining us on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. Who's the MVP of the defense for you?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Oddly enough, he's not the leader on the stats, but Suntaran Perkins has been phenomenal. He has been, to use the words from LSU, I don't know that he's as good as Harold Perkins was when Harold Perkins was really a dominant force on that defense. But Suntaran has just been a player that can play many different positions. But I think if you really pin me down, it's probably J.J. Pegues. Being able to be so versatile and being a team leader, Bo. I mean, Prince Emmanuel talked about it at the end of the game is they try to be leaders off the field, which that will transition to on the field. And it is a very good unit. It's one that's cohesive, that does things together. It's very, very close-knit. And, I think there could be an argument to be made that Pooh Paul, the transfer from Arkansas, leading the team in tackles, could be the leader. Prince Emmanuel, I just made mention of him. He's been phenomenal as well. So there are a couple of players that have been big. Trey Amos, the lockdown corner, has just completely shut down the right boundary for Ole Miss. And he's been very good, and Georgia even made mention they tried to stay away from him as much as they could because he was doing such a good job on their receivers. It's been a dominating defensive performance, and oddly enough, it's been even better each game. They seem to get better as the games go along, and so that bodes well for 2 weeks when Ole Miss goes to Florida and then hosts Mississippi State, and in two games where Ole Miss will be the heavy favorite, and you have to play hard, but I think for Ole Miss, not only do they need to win the game, but they need to win these games convincingly because it's going to be eye test involved. Now, I said when they played Oklahoma at home, Arkansas on the road, at that point in the season, it didn't matter if you win 7-6 or 57-6, just win the game. That's not necessarily the case now. Ole Miss needs to have some style points in the next couple of weeks as it gears up for a possible college football playoff run. I don't know. We'll see Tuesday. The good news is they have teams ahead of them that they can run the score up. The bad news, they're not teams that are ahead of them, so they can't jump them. So they may need to just keep their spot.
Sure. Brad Logan, Ole Miss insider, that was great. And Caden Davis was unbelievable, too, on Saturday.
Best place kicker in football.
Good Lord. Unbelievable. All right, Brad Logan, congratulations. And you did a great job. I follow you covering game week and game day, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks, Bo.
Brad Logan on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Best defense, best atmosphere in Oxford. And I questioned that during the offseason, if it was the most talented team or if it was 2015. Now, the way they played the last 3 weeks, it has been, for sure. We'll be back. Michael Bratton, that SEC podcast at 9:30.